Okay, so this past Sunday we watched a video for our Sunday Sangha on clinging, and the teacher talked a lot about the pretty obvious ways that we cling. And so today I figured that I would want to talk about to clarify what clinging is, and then I'll also talk maybe a little bit about the subtle ways that we cling, the many subtle ways that we cling. So that was the motivation for today's talk. So what is, clinging? Clinging is in the family of craving or desire. And in the Buddhist teachings, it's a big teaching in Buddhism about being aware of how we crave and how we want. There's this constant wanting mind that's always wanting something, some particular experience. It wants comfort, it wants more tea or a different kind of tea. It's constantly wanting something. More of this, less of that, right? So there's an energetic tug of war that's happening with this constant, and it starts out with the first noble truth. The Buddha talked to us about the first noble truth is that there is dukkha, there is dissatisfaction in the mind. There is this struggle with not being satisfied easily and wanting more. And he said the second noble truth, the cause, is this wanting mind, right? So when we crave something or a particular experience or thing, we start wanting it. Then when we get in and really kind of into the wanting and we get lost in the desire of it and we think about it and we scheme and we plan and then we finally get what we want. We like it so much, or we like the idea of it so much that we start clinging to it, right? We cling to the idea of having the perfect relationship or the idea or the relationship itself that our child is we're always gonna be really close to our child or something, some identity or something. Some people really cling to specific sense pleasure objects that they have a hard time letting go of. It's really easy to notice intense craving and clinging, right? Like the one thing we can't do without, that it obsesses our mind. We have to think and plan and, I go in and out of being addicted to Diet Coke, for instance. This is my latest addiction of many I have had. But anyhow, so when I'm on the on cycle of my craving addiction, I have to make sure that I have enough in my refrigerator so that I can have at least one a day, right? And then I plan my whole day around this crazy Diet Coke. And then I feel guilty when I'm drinking it, but it's delicious. I love it. Because I know it's not good. It's got aspartame in it, whatever. It's really intense. And there's a lot of planning and scheming. And, my whole day revolves around that Diet Coke when I'm on the on cycle of this addiction. That's really easy to see, right? It's for us practitioners, the Buddha told us we need to inspect, identify, and become very, very, very familiar with our patterns of craving and clinging, right? So if I'm really craving and clinging my Diet Cokes and someone comes into my house and opens my refrigerator and cracks open my last Diet Coke, how do you think I'm going to act? Not, I might be like, and I might not say anything, but internally I'm thinking, how dare you grab my Diet Coke? How rude, you could have at least asked. Anyhow, so right now I'm into lattes. That's my latest addiction. Those are obvious. But today I'm going to talk a little bit more about the more subtle ways that we cling. Here's Alexis de Tocqueville, 1823. I have seen the freest and best educated of men in the happiest circumstances the world can afford. Yet it seemed to me that a cloud hung on their brow, and they appeared serious and almost sad, even when they were enjoying themselves, because they never stop thinking of the good things they have not yet got. Yeah. When we start bringing mindfulness to the mind, we start to see how insatiable it is. It just almost never stops. When you start listening to your thoughts, it's this almost constant scheming of how to make the next moment or this moment or tomorrow better, 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 better. It's like it's addicted to the better mode. And even when you've got the most perfect moment you've ever wanted, then as soon as the moment starts to change because of impermanence, the truth that nothing lasts forever, then the mind starts to do what? It starts to cling. It doesn't want that to end, right? Yeah, it wants to keep it going over and over and over again. So we need to see this truth very, very clearly. I'm just going to just tell you a little bit about craving. The Buddha taught that he taught a lot of things. I love the simile of the raft sutta. And in this sutta, the Buddha tells a story. He asked his students, and I use this one often, so if you've heard it 100 times from me, I apologize, but it's so poignant, right? He says to the students, what if you were to go, you had to get to a certain destination, a long journey, maybe somebody died or someone's calling you and you have to go. But you came upon, there was a river in your way and you realized there's no way that you can go on your journey until you cross this river. So what do? And his students said, well, you build a raft. He said, how do you build a raft? Everybody in those days knew how to get the logs and twine and clay and whatever to build this raft. And he said, okay, is that all you need? And they said, no, you need a long pole to push you across the river. And you need to find a good place to set it into the water and push your way across, figure out a way, shallow place to push yourself across the river. He was like, okay, great. He says, so once you get across the river and you have still this long journey to take destination, he said, what are you going to do with the raft? Are you going to put it on your back and drag it the rest of the way? And they all said in unison, no, absolutely not. It's too heavy. It'll, wear you down. You won't be able to go very fast. He said, so what are you going to do? He said, you leave the raft at this edge of the river. And he said, okay, that's what we're supposed to be doing with our experiences, pleasant and unpleasant experiences in our life. He said, but most people are dragging their rafts around with them. Yeah, they're clinging to their raft. They're dragging it around with them. And he talked about the importance of knowing when you're clinging and being able to let go of it, to leave the raft. It had its usefulness at one point, but it's no longer useful now. Yeah. Here's a quote. When a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are the saint's pockets. That's an India saying. Right? Why is that? What does that mean? How does that relate to this? When we're, when we get hyper focused on something, that's all we can see. For instance, with my Diet Coke analogy, every time I go into a store, what's the first thing I'm looking for? Wonder how much their Diet Cokes are. Maybe they're a better deal here than, yeah? But it's very, very painful to get caught and craving and clinging. I heard a story once, my hairdresser was telling me that her neighbor collected these train cars and had all these special collectible trains, and never left his house because he didn't want to leave he hardly ever left his house because he didn't want to leave his trains. It was just he and his trains, and then he got sick and he went into hospice. They brought him into hospice, and that he was so fretful, and he said, if you bring me my trains, I'll feel better. Yeah, so he was really clinging to his collectible trains. So she went and brought some of his favorite trains to help bring him some peace. Of course, I saw that through a Buddhist perspective, like, oh, he's really clinging to his train car parts. But that's what we do, and we do it unconsciously. Yeah. So the reason why we want to see our craving and our clinging and to set it, just to let those go, to leave the rafts on the side of the river, is because they cause us pain and suffering. And they're weights that we drag around, right? The Buddha taught that there are 3 ways that we crave. There are 3 forms of craving, right? The 3 forms of craving is, number 1, we crave for sense pleasures. So this is when it's kama tanha, when we have a thirst for our sensual desires. Thirst for the Diet Coke is one of them. But usually possessions, home, sex, drink, food, touch, these are all kama tanha. Comfort, I would say, is a big one that's very subtle, right? We can think, oh, I don't need this particular clothes. I can let go of, I'm not really attached and clinging to any of my belongings. I can do without all of them. But I have to wear specific shoes so that my feet will be comfortable, or have my certain pillow so that my back will be, we can really cling to our comforts. My mom has these special pillows that she sits on, and back pillows that she likes so much, she got one for each and every one of her chairs. So when you go to sit down, you're having to navigate all these pillows anywhere in her house, right? She wants everyone to be comfortable, to seek comfort and pleasure. This can get really subtle. I found myself at times being outside, hearing a particular bird, and really loving the shrill? Is that the sound of a bird? Or trill? Yeah, trill. And every certain time of the day, this bird trills, and I'm like, oh, there's my baby. I might even name it, right? And then every day I'm waiting to hear and the day that I don't hear that bird, I think, uh-oh, what's wrong? Where's my baby? I've had this experience with loud noises or annoying noises. Have anybody ever experienced that? Not wanting certain noises that, about a year ago, they were doing some work across the house across from me, and they had some generator going all the time, right? And it was very subtle. Can you guys do who can do a generator sound? Right, whatever it was, I can't do it. Anyhow, at first I was like, oh, that's a little obnoxious. And then I could smell the fumes coming from it, right? And so then after 2, 3, 4, 5 days, I was like, what are you doing with this generator? When are you going to turn it off? I was starting to get on my nerves, So I noticed that craving for the silence was an important part of what I was craving here. The second form of craving, or the clinging, I was clinging to my silence, is what I was clinging to. The thirst for existence, bhava tanha, the craving for becoming, right? This is I knew a guy who, anytime he met someone, I was like, here it comes. My name is so-and-so, I went to Harvard University. So every time he'd meet a new person, I'd be like, okay, here comes Harvard. Yeah, I went to so-and-so, I went to Harvard. So he was really clinging to his Harvard identity. Does that make sense? Um, it helped him feel more special or something. I don't know what his clinging was. But we can cling to our becoming, we can cling to our identities, we can cling to our successes, we can cling to even being, a Buddhist practitioner. Hi, I'm Ronnie, and I'm a Buddhist teacher. One of the first things that we tell people, I meditate. Do you meditate? Or I'm a yogi. Are you a yogi? But this is when we have this thirst for existence itself, and it can get really subtle, right? And the subtle ways is some of us, especially, we practice our morality practice. We practice being a good person. We might subtly want people to see us as generous or kind or as a good person. And when someone questions our integrity or our generosity or something, we might get a little, I'm a generous person. How are you? Who do you think you are? Yeah, so these are some of the more subtle ways that we might thirst for this existence, to be seen a particular way. Yeah. The third one is desire for non-existence or extinction. Vibhava tanha. When I learned about this one years ago, I thought, that's not me, right? But I think it's probably more prevalent now than it used to be because of the pandemic, right? We got used to being hermits and staying at home. And for many of us, it was hard to come out of the house again. We got used to just kind of hiding away from the danger. It was much safer. Didn't have to talk to people, meet people, take risks. So if you have any social anxiety, this is that clinging, craving and clinging. Yeah, wanting to sleep a lot is this form of clinging, right? I know that when I have when I'm going through a rough time with high anxiety, there's part of me that just wants to, I wish I could just lay down and sleep for the next 2 or 3 days. Yeah, it's very subtle, like, I wish I could just go to sleep now. And it can be that way, very subtle, when it starts raining, suddenly feeling, I think I'm gonna go sleep. Do you know what I'm talking about? But this one is about wanting to be released from pain and stress. Like life is too boring, or it's not exciting enough, or we have high anxiety, or we're just tired of the same old rigmarole day in and day out. For me, when I get into this extinction, I just want people to leave me alone. My phone vibrates. I'm like, oh God, leave me alone. My phone rings. Oh God, leave me alone. I open my email, oh God, why can't people just leave it? This doesn't happen often, but when it does, I have this sudden desire to avoid and escape and be left alone. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this is the clinging to extinction, right? Obviously, the really intense will be the people that can't leave their homes or suicide. Yeah. Here's a student asked Zen teacher Steve Allen once, if you were given a wish-fulfilling jewel, what would you wish for? And Allen replied, to stop wishing. Yeah. So this is when we're at peace with whatever's happening. Doesn't mean that we don't do things to protect ourselves, to plan for the future, to meet our goals, but we don't cling to them. And when they don't work out, we don't freak out, right? We just adjust. Yeah. We try to meet each and every moment in a healthy perspective. Like, okay, this didn't work out the way I had hoped, but this is how it is now. So how can I respond to this reality? When we can't accept reality as it is, we get angry, we get hurt, we get upset, we beat ourselves up. Oh, I'm not being the person I want to be. Right? We're clinging to us being a particular way. We beat ourselves up. Maybe we beat others up, right? Like I'm teaching Taekwondo once a week now. My grandson has asked me to teach him Taekwondo, and I'm going to open it up to people who want to come. And I had a testing the other day, right across the, where are we? Right across here. And the room that I rented had people in it. There was somebody renting it, but he was going to get out soon. But when I first came in, the first thing I was like, wait a minute, this isn't what I expected. There's not supposed to be someone in this room. And the owner came running over to me, going, I'm so sorry. I forgot that you were here. He'll be out soon. And she's doing a lot of apologizing and placating. And I was like, breathing in, breathing out. I'm clinging to wanting the room that I rented. Yeah. And then, okay, I'm sure as soon as he leaves, we'll be able to use the room. Yeah. So being able to see that I was clinging, let go, relax, set the raft down. This is the reality. Okay, we'll sit in the waiting room and wait for him to finish with the room. All right, this is great. So what are some of the subtle ways that and as soon as I let that go, like, okay, won't have this room. A few minutes early, that's what came a few minutes early. There's this peace. There's a relaxation. There's there's almost a joy can creep in during these times. Instead, I'm like, when is he going to leave the room? If I'm really clinging, it will be painful for me and everyone else waiting for this room. But they look to me and they're like, well, she's relaxed. I guess we are too. All of us who are waiting. I had a friend who's been hacked. And she's talking about all the ways that they've infiltrated her phone and her computer. And she finally went to some specialists and they helped her get all of her stuff back. Well, then she's gotten rehacked again, right? And she asked me, her phone at least, she asked me if she could come over and use my computer because she can't use hers because she's getting rid of her Wi-Fi and because it's been hacked. And I said yes, because she has not, she could. I said yes. She's a good friend of mine. Come on over. Subtle clinging. Oh shoot. I hope I don't get hacked now. And I said to her, there's nothing you're gonna get online for that could infiltrate me and me get hacked, right? And she was like, no, that's, it was through my Wi-Fi. I'm not using my Wi-Fi, so that blah, blah, blah. So she explained, I was like, okay. But I saw this subtle way I was clinging to my security. I'm co-presenting an online series right now with another teacher on Sundays, and he has a different way of operating, right? From 5:20 to 5:23, our plan is to do this, this, and that. From 5:23 to 5:28, our plan is this, and 5:28 to 5:30. You know what? I'm like, that's not the way I roll. I throw some ideas on a piece of paper, and then whatever wants to arise comes out. So I found myself getting really anxious and clinging to wanting it to be my way. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, let go of this. Just go with the 5:23 to 5:28 plan. I've had to do that this week. So that's really subtle for me. Today, when it started raining, I noticed a subtle, here we go, raining again. Yeah. And I noticed this little bit of dissatisfaction, kind of like unhappiness that it was raining again. Oh, I'm like subtly clinging to it not raining every day. yeah. And of course, I've noticed this about myself, and I don't know what your patterns are like, but I've noticed that I get excited about going somewhere and doing something. I put it on my calendar, meeting with friends, or going out to dinner, or going to see a movie, or going to a museum, or some educational thing or spiritual thing. And then invariably, 98% of the time, when it's time for me to leave, I wish I wasn't going. I'm like, oh God, here we go. Now I have to go. And it's so weird. I don't plan for that to happen. I don't know why it happens. It just does. So I'm like, ha ha ha. There's the desired not to go and the desire to stay home. It's okay. Because 99% of the time that I go, I end up enjoying what I planned to do anyhow, or ended up being beneficial in some way. But that I just know that there's a subtle clinging to not wanting to go that will happen most of the time. Yeah. And these are the very subtle ways that we cling. So thank you for listening. And in a minute, we're going to open it up to the group to see what are some of the subtle ways you cling, and how can you be with it, right? How can you bring your loving attention to the clinging? The Buddha taught that as soon as we see the suffering and the contraction that the clinging is causing, we bring mindful awareness to it. The mind naturally lets go because it doesn't want to feel that pain. Yeah. So if we can be like, oh, let's just soften and relax, see it for what it is, let that go if we can, then that's where our peace comes in. But we have to bring mindful awareness to see the pain that this clinging is causing us. All right, thank you for your deep listening. And I will turn this off.
How many people